introduce, say thank you, first of all, for all of you who did come and for your understanding of the schedule change that we had to make. My name is Eleanor Latimer. It is not
Yeah, you
Eileen.
got now we got
Uh,
it.
and I'm a board member of REN. As quick background, we're a nonpartisan organization that was founded by Harvard Business School alums and inspired by the research of Michael Porter and Catherine Gell on how gridlock is hurting our country, political gridlock. We seek to research better election processes that will improve our political systems, and that will in turn lead to better representation. It will enable voters to have a clearer views of some of the issues with competitive policy ideas from which they can choose. And we also believe that in turn, this will result in more effective government. Today, our speaker is Peter Cyrus. He's our director of research, and his research started a number of years ago on this topic, but in anticipation of the 2020 election problems, he produced a very fact-filled and fact-based analysis. And that analysis enabled REN to catalyze work among academics and congressional members, and it resulted in the 2022 Electoral Count Reform Act. Our discussion today is about the significant risks that we see in coming up in the 2026 elections in terms of trustworthy results. Can we trust the results of this election? So, Peter, I'm going to let you take over.
Thanks. Let me see if I can
What is going
do
on here?
this. Um,
So,
can anybody see this?
yes.
Yes.
Okay. Today we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, how it will destroy elections, and why we must act now. And I will apologize to everybody in advance. I've been in the hospital for the last 2 weeks. So if in the middle of the presentation I keel over or something like that, don't worry. Okay. So in the year 2000, there was a disputed election, and Al Gore called George W. Bush and said, we must put aside the partisan rancor. May God bless this country, and I give my concession. I don't think the next time this happens, if in 2028, when Donald Trump runs for a third term, you're going to see the leaders being as gracious. And because our country is so divided, our democracy could be at risk. And the point I'm making here is the chances of having a highly disputed election are heightened by technology, especially artificial intelligence. And given the lack of sufficient defenses in our election system, how are we going to react? Um, Now, AI is increasing geometrically. There's a race to the top, the Magnificent Seven, to see who's going to develop the most effective tools. It was like what happened in social media 20 years ago. And as we celebrate these advances, we have to remember, social media revolution was going to give voice to the voiceless, build communities, expand democracies, empower the next generation. But we've ended up with polarization on levels never matched, a rise in populism, and a generation of teenagers decimated with mental health challenges. Hey, what could go wrong with this picture? I don't know. But in this presentation, we're going to discuss how AI makes information cheap, targeted, and realistic, how our election system has few protections, and how elections could be destroyed, and what we can do about it. Now, to appreciate the speed at which AI is advancing, You only have to visit the Department of Housing and Urban Development on February 24th of last year. Trump and Musk had just announced massive layoffs, and as workers arrived Monday morning, they were greeted by this video of Trump kissing Elon Musk's toes with the caption, "Long live the real king." Now, I know as you look at this, I know everybody knows that Elon is a remarkable man, but he doesn't have two left feet. So you've got to figure out that this could be AI. And I mean, I don't know how much the president likes kissing toes, but HUD is a cabinet organization where one would expect security to be extremely tight. If the hackers were able to create this video of Trump and Musk and broadcast it throughout the building. Now, I don't know, as I said, I don't know if Trump likes kissing toes, but I know he likes kissing faces. And here's a video of from the DeSantis war room of Trump kissing Fauci. Now we know, Trump loves Fauci, but my guess is this is also AI. Okay. Now this is Newsom body slamming Trump after the Proposition 50 passed. I'm guessing again this could be AI because I don't think Newsom is quite so muscle bound. But we know Trump and Newsom have a personal animus since Newsom's first wife, Kelly Guilfoyle, current ambassador to Greece, was engaged to Donald Trump Jr. But, I looked on my WWE schedule and I didn't see the Trump Newsom fight coming tonight. Now, here is on the week of September 29th of last year, the government was facing a shutdown, and Trump invited Schumer and Jeffries to meet with him at the White House. Strangely, Trump and Jeffries had never met. And shortly after the meeting ended, President Trump posted a video on True Social with Jeffries wearing a sombrero and a handlebar mustache as mariachi plays. I mean, so, but these are the kind of things that are happening more and more. Before the primary in 2024, in New Hampshire, every Democratic voter received a robocall for somebody sounding like Joe Biden who said, "What a bunch of malarkey." And basically, don't vote now, vote in November, save your vote. Now, the originator of the call, who would work for one of Biden's opponents, said he was, just trying to send a wake-up call. And he paid $150 to some magician in New Orleans to create a tape that sounded exactly like Biden. Now, the instigator was arrested and fined, but none of these other people ran into any trouble. Also in 2023, videos circulated showing Elizabeth Warren speaking on MSNBC saying Republicans shouldn't be able to vote in 2024. And the video went viral. It attracted 200,000 views on X in the first week, and it did have its intended effect of motivating Republican voters. Now, here's my favorite of all these AI things. American Eagle ran a series of ads featuring Sydney Sweeney with, as you can see on the right, Sydney Sweeney has great genes. So on August 20th, 2025, an AI video landed on social media, and it was Amy Klobuchar speaking at a Senate hearing. And she said, quote, "If Republicans are going to have beautiful girls with perfect titties in their ads, we want ads for Democrats too. We want ugly fat bitches wearing pink wigs and long ass fake nails being loud and twerking on top of a cop car at a Waffle House because they didn't get enough ketchup. Just because we're the party of ugly people doesn't mean we can't be featured in ads." And I know most of us are too fat to wear jeans or too ugly to go outside. Now, this also went viral. And what was interesting is Klobuchar asked to have it taken down. Most sites did, but X and a couple of others just left it up there saying, hey, we can't do anything about this. And finally, at a live Washington Post summit, tech columnist Jeffrey Fowler spent 15 minutes creating an AI deepfake showing Chuck Schumer endorsing Spider-Man for president and using Schumer's voice and a photograph of the two. Now, as you can tell from the photograph, the fake image is that of Schumer. Spider-Man is real and is running for president. Of course, the surprise to me was Schumer's only 5'9". I would have thought Spider-Man would be taller, but you can never tell these days. Okay, so those are examples of things that you see every day in the political and social media area. AI is growing geometrically. And the important point is our election system is especially vulnerable. Why is that? Well, other countries have one election system. In the US, we have 8,000. Every state has its own system. Most cities do, counties, municipalities. And according to the Brennan Center, in the decentralized US election system, target rich, resource poor jurisdictions with limited capacity to address cybersecurity issues present one of the most concerning vulnerabilities. These offices have no expertise, are dependent on their municipalities. Nearly half of all election offices operate with one full-time employee, and nearly a third have no staff. Yet they've got to combat all this stuff that's going on. Now, with 8,000 different systems and minimal staffing, boards of election are not prepared for the type of havoc AI could present. According to Zach Amos in Rehabs, the cybersecurity oversights are making infrastructure the most fragile it has ever been. And while cyber attacks are increasing severity and frequency, the hackers are evolving robustness and intricacy. There's nothing going on in the election system to prevent it. We have companies worth tens of trillions of dollars developing all this new software. Who do you think is going to win? Okay. Now, as bad as this, as gloomy as this picture is, it's actually worse because of the federal government. Trump slashed funding for the one organization designed to protect elections and the country from cybersecurity threats. There's an agency called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, within the Department of Homeland Security. It designated elections as important. And yet in 2025, with recommendations from DOGE, Trump's budget called for 500 million in cuts from CISA. And they also focus on foreign influence in elections. So at exactly the time when you need it most, it's gone. Now, ironically, right after the cuts and right after the attack on Iran's nuclear site, someone hacked into the Arizona Secretary of State's election website, went to the candidates page, and posted the following photograph of the Ayatollah. Now, I'm not saying that the Ayatollah is going to get a lot of votes in Arizona, but the fact that somebody can show the Ayatollah as a candidate in a state is pretty worrisome. Now, to make matters worse, there's another organization called the Federal Election Commission. And so what's Trump doing with that one? Well, three board members have been dismissed. That means there are only two board members, but a quorum takes three. So it means that the organization can't operate because it doesn't have a quorum. And even so, the staff was reduced by 20%. And during the 2025 election, when the government was closed, everybody on the staff was furloughed. So just so we understand, the Federal Election Commission during the elections had no board, no quorum, and no staff. This is good. So this is not David versus Goliath. David at least had a slingshot, and there was one Goliath. This is 7 Goliaths against one David, who was blindfolded and has his hands tied behind his back. This promises to be a slaughter. Now, when you think of AI destroying election, you probably think of people hacking into voting machines and transferring millions of votes from one candidate to another. With current technology, you could send misleading messages to all voters, show poll workers stuffing ballot boxes, a board of elections being invaded by armed gangs. You could deregister millions of voters. You could stop machines from counting votes, transfer millions of votes from one candidate to the other, the way Trump claimed Dominion voting systems did in 2020. You could change the count on every voting machine. These are easy. And given the weakness in our election process, AI could leave us with a system in which none of the presidential candidates reached a majority in the electoral college, in which many elections for the House and the Senate were still being challenged. And with none of the elections scheduled, the only path would be for the outgoing president to invoke the Insurrection Act and declare martial law. When we're hearing a lot of discussion these days about the Insurrection Act, so when this occurs, we'll all know what it is. Now, this is a frightening scenario. Given the advances in AI, the age of our election technology, the weakness of the guardrails, and the polarization, such a situation could easily occur. But strange as it may seem, this is not, to me, the bigger problem. Americans are resilient. If we saw election was completely disrupted, we'd find a way to conduct another election. Yeah, there'd be riots and deaths, but we would figure out a way to survive. What I believe is a far more likely scenario with AI would be to change the results of our elections without anyone realizing it had happened. Now, destroying an election may seem like a huge undertaking, but it's actually really simple. AI only needs to change a few votes in a few states. So here are 5 presidential elections in this century. In total, 690,000 votes out of 678 million, 0.1%, would have changed all these elections. Think about how easy it would be to change a small number of votes without anyone knowing. Now, if you were a hacker, how would you accomplish this? Okay, the first step is to acquire information from small government offices. You hack in and get the names. Then you inundate the offices with deceptive open record requests that appear to come from real constituents. And while the election officials are scrambling to respond to these requests, hackers would tunnel in and get whatever they needed. And in such an instance, it would be almost impossible for 2 people election office to deal with the hackers. Now, what will the hackers do with the information? Well, first, they could send out libelous information from purported to be from candidates, like the pictures I showed earlier of Donald Trump sucking on Elon Musk's toes, those kind of things. They could send out a message to Latino voters saying, if I'm elected, I will arrest all Latino non-citizens. Or Jewish voters, I'm advocating giving the West Bank back to the Palestinians. You could have robocalls like the one from Donald Trump or Elizabeth Warren. So the point is, hackers do not need to change massive numbers of votes. They just need to get people in selective areas to change their vote or refrain from voting. What's the next step? The next step is to create fake websites to convey misinformation. Since all election officials make public appearances, there's ample stock video to make AI videos of these officials with voice capture. Now, they could also create their own websites with almost the same name as the voting website. For example, in Harris County, Texas, the voting website is harrisvotes.com, having nothing to do with Kamala. The hackers could use harriscountyvotes.com or harrisvotes.org to mislead voters. And when voters Google Board of Elections, this fake website could pop up and provide voters with misleading information. And I've found thousands of these websites. I just listed a couple below. Now, once the website would be up and running, the next step would be to figure out ways to get selected people not to vote so the results can be changed. Now, here's a simple one I call misdirection. The hackers could pick a particular group, like Native Americans in Arizona, and send them emails indicating the address of the polling place had been changed. Some of these Native Americans have to drive 200 miles to vote. So instead of a polling place 100 miles to the west, they could be sent to a town 100 miles to the east. And by the time they arrive, the town has no polling place. It'd be too late for them to find a real polling place. Now, here's the important point. Biden won Arizona by 10,000 votes. How tough would it be to misdirect 10,000 Native Americans to change the outcome? Hackers could also focus on specific demographics. A hacker that wanted Republicans to win could send select names of Latinos in Arizona or blacks in Pennsylvania and send notices before the election that they have been deregistered. Many would challenge such an email. But if only a few give up on voting, the hackers win. Hackers that wanted Democrats to win could target rural areas and swing states. You could target a group like former felons saying, hey, the state has changed the rules, you're no longer eligible to vote. Hackers could go a step further and actually deregister voters. Now, here's the important point. In 2016, if they had deregistered 5 Republicans in each polling site, Pennsylvania would have gone for Clinton. In 2020, if they deregistered 4.5 Democrats in each polling site, Georgia would have gone for Trump. This is not to deregister millions. The key is to deregister enough people to change the results without attracting attention. And in the swing states. Now, this is my favorite. And this is, to me, the riskiest one of the AI. You hack in and look at everybody's voting record. Then you see who didn't vote in 2020 and 2024. Somebody who hasn't voted in 2020 and 2024, no matter who they are, is not going to vote in 2026. So what you do is you change their addresses, you order mail-in ballots, you fill in the mail-in ballots, AI does, copy the voter's signature from the registration day, and send the ballots back. I mean, in Wisconsin, with 3.5 million people, is anybody going to notice 30,000 people who didn't vote in the last 2 elections sending in mail-in votes? Nah. So given the lower turnout and the closeness of the election, this strategy by itself could change almost any election. Another tactic would be to send videos of the head of the Board of Election to a small number of voters saying, we have encountered encountered fraud in our election workers and postponing elections until Thursday. Or another video showing armed invaders attacking a polling place. I said, because of the attack on our polling place, do not risk your life from voting. We're extending the voting period for 1 week. And most people aren't going to believe this. All we need is a small number of people to believe this to have a real change. Another way to do it is to actually hack into the votes and transfer a few votes to third parties. And I just wanted to show this number because, here is Alyssa Slotkin, who defeated Mike Rogers by 19,000 votes. And, if you hacked in and transferred 20,000 votes from Slotkin to each of these third party candidates, nobody's noticing. So with AI, instead of trying to disrupt the entire election, the hackers need only focus on a few simple tasks that will be easy to implement and difficult to identify. We talked about libelous voter information, fake websites, sending voters to the wrong place, deregistering selective voters, deregistering other voters, sending mail-in ballots to people who have not voted in the last two elections, and publicizing riots and other events. The point, as I said, is if you got less than 11,000 votes, you switch Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Wisconsin. That's really easy. Now, the question is, what can be done? There are no silver bullets. There are obviously no way to delay the progress of AI. Our system is scattered and undefended, and the risk will go higher. But there are some things that we can do now, and I'm just going to briefly cover them. The first step is to restrict fraudulent information before the elections. Now, you can't scream fire in a crowded theater. Why shouldn't I understand, we don't want to regulate social media, but why should we allow social media to publicize these kind of things in the short period before the election? It's one thing to have a robocall with Joe Biden telling you not to vote. It's another thing to have that call placed on election day, which was when it was. It's one thing to publish misleading claims. It's another thing to do it, right around the election. And so the federal government and state board should have the right to demand misleading information on social media immediately be removed. That candidates, governments, and individuals can sue newspapers, magazines, television, radio stations, but no one has the right to sue social media sites. We support changes in Section 230, but at a minimum, we think that government should take action to remove misleading claims in the period shortly before elections. Now, the good news is, as of August of last year, 25 states passed some sort of law restricting social media, restricting deepfakes. So it's not as if nothing is happening. And we want to look at the states that have done nothing or have done limited things and get them to act. The second step, which again may sound stupid and basic, is election websites. Hackers create their own websites to mislead voters. Most use domains, .com, .org, .net, which anyone can purchase. Only verified government entities can administer a website with a .gov domain. If every government website switched to .gov, you make it much harder for the hackers to get in there and post misleading information. Now, only 31% of election websites use .gov at the present time. Changing a domain name, informing people, and changing a website can be time-consuming and expensive. It took Tarrant County, Texas, the most populous county, to transition 1 year to complete the transformation. But we believe strongly that state governments need to provide funding and technical support so all the election sites adopt .gov names. It's going to cost something short term, but the benefit to limiting hacking will be very important. Another step is to utilize second level security. Second level security is what happens with the banks and every place else where they ask you for your 6-digit code. And the reason this is important is that hackers have a much more difficult time hacking into places when they have to provide a 6-digit code and when they have to do something like a capture photo. Now, I know you don't like, and I don't like spending the time clicking on the number of fire engines in a photo. But the trick here is to stop the hackers from getting in the first place. Second, did I go to? Sorry. Okay. Now, another issue that needs to be focused on, and which we need to focus, is election workers. In 2024, an election worker in Texas was assaulted by asking a man to remove his hat at a Trump site, his Trump hat at a voting site. Sorry. Many election workers have had their lives threatened. And with artificial intelligence, posting pictures of these election workers is significantly enhancing the risk. So again, we should set a rule that a social media company is not allowed to post and has to immediately remove any videos of election workers. Now, more training should be provided so election workers can recognize the threat. Think of who an election worker is. Most are old people, most are 65, 70, they got extra time, They barely know what social media is, and certainly most don't know what AI is. So why shouldn't states have training programs to recruit tech experts to teach election officials how to identify and deter threats? Experts can usually identify AI-generated text because it often includes short sentences, repeated words and phrases, voice images can be altered, or you can find things like Elon Musk with 2 left feet. If these election workers know what to look for, they have a better chance of stopping it. And here is something really important. With increasing threats from hackers, Board of Elections must increase auditing, including both process and after election audits. Process audit is how the system is working. Election audits determine that the votes were real and that all those dead people, whose mail-in votes were sent in by the hackers, were not real. And we spend very little time and energy doing auditing now. And given the increase in AI, this is something that has to change. Next, voting technology needs to be improved. Look at this chart over here. This is a picture of states using voting equipment that is 10 years old or older. Now, if you look at this picture, you say, well, like it's all those red states like, you know, Mississippi or Louisiana. It's also New York, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Oregon, Washington. I mean, give me a break. Wisconsin, Minnesota. This is bipartisan. But the problem is, and 23 states use equipment that's no longer manufactured. 25 states use machines that are easy for flip votes. Older machines are much easier to hack and manipulate. Why shouldn't we have voting machines that are better protected from hackers? Now, the federal government needs to wake up. As I said before, how ridiculous is it that the Federal Election Commission should be closed during an election? How ridiculous is it that the government should take half the budget out of CISA during the time of an election? This is nuts. As we are facing a revolution, our government's walking away from doing anything to protect elections. I don't know if any of you are frightened by the risks, but we are. Now, who should care and who should help? It should be clear that our government doesn't care if elections are destroyed by AI or if AI can find ways of changing election results so no one will even know what happened. Who should care about the risk and knows enough to help? There's actually a simple answer. The AI companies themselves. They understand the technology. They deal with this stuff every day. They've developed AI and know its algorithms. They don't want to see the U.S. in a crisis. I mean, all these companies need with their elevated stock prices is a highly disputed election. So we believe that the tech companies are the best vehicle for creating guardrails. Now, many, interestingly, are already taking steps. Microsoft announced a program in 2023 to protect elections. It committed to help candidates and campaign navigate cybersecurity challenges, et cetera, et cetera. And it also endorsed the bipartisan Protect Elections from Deceptive AI Act, introduced by Klobuchar, Collins, Hawley, and Coons. In 2024, 27 AI companies signed an accord focusing on how to protect elections from AI, developing new content, assessing models for election-related risks, detecting AI election content, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, nobody forced them to do this. They got together. And as we can see from this chart, blue means the goal is met, yellow means partial satisfaction, and red means no action or report. But here are 27 companies. And if you look at the pictures, OpenAI and Google achieved their goals on every commitment. Microsoft, Meta, TikTok, and Anthropic have also made substantial progress. Now, if these companies are willing to step up and help them, why can't government organize to work with these companies to limit the risk before it's too late? Okay, so let's just review what we talked about. AI technology is improving geometrically. Our decentralized voting system, the minimal staffing and outdated technology is especially vulnerable. If we don't act now, we could face a significant crisis in coming elections. To prevent elections from being hacked and results change, we need stricter rules on AI during elections, better trained election work, better technology, second level security, and the use of .gov websites. The federal government should strengthen CISA and the FEC AI companies should step up as they are starting to and help states and local governments understand and repel the threats from AI. If AI companies keep developing this new technology, they need to take the lead in working with state and local governments so our elections are safe and fair. And we believe we have to act now to protect our election system. So thank you.
I think we can open it up for some questions. I'd have a couple myself, but let's first open it to the audience at large. You can use the raise hand. I'll start with one question, Peter, on the point of getting the owners of AI to police themselves before an election. Wouldn't it be simpler and less controversial to do what many countries have done, which is to basically ban any political advertising within a few days of an election?
Yeah, but I have Peter, can you stop sharing your screen? Hold on. I'm going to stop share. How do I gotta stop sharing my screen. 1 second. Share. I don't know. I'm looking for how to stop share.
If you hover over the top of the screen, something should pop up and it allows you to stop sharing.
Yeah, I keep clicking on it, but it doesn't. Can't the host make me unhost?
Oh, sure.
That way you don't have to look at my screen. And the answer, Mike, is yeah, that would make sense. What do you see as the chances of government doing that? None. I mean,
It'd be done on a state by state level, again, focusing on the states that are most vulnerable.
You have, I don't know if you've ever watched TV in the period before an election, but if you have, what you will realize is that our media companies are reliant on two things and two things only. Number one is political advertising, and number two is advertising for pharmaceuticals that you don't know what they are or what they do. I mean, in the 2 weeks that I was in the hospital, when I got released, they gave me all these new pharmaceuticals that I never knew about, but I'd seen all the ads on, and I got now I can sing the Jardian song. We are a long way from getting states to do that. It would be a good idea, but we're a long way from that.
See, Kelly Lane has got her hand up. If she can unmute herself, I think she's got some good questions about freedom of speech and how we keep that open as well.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for doing this today and for having me on. I really appreciated your last thing about the gerrymandering, and I think you pretty much said I'm a Democrat, but it's so important we're nonpartisan. And I want to I bring that up first because I just want to, I'm guessing we probably have mostly Democrats here. I'm an independent who voted for Obama. I just want to give you a little background where I'm coming from. I would not have known about some things that happened in recent years had I not done some work with some real independent left media. And my concern about the censorship, there was a case of Consortium News. The government had hired a company called NewsGuard and censored them along with a bunch of really right-wing outlets. And there were also some NGOs. In that sense, you always hear Republicans talking about NGOs, but NGOs that were really censoring and pushing on Twitter. Another thing, maybe you heard of the Twitter files, to censor. And so my concern is that, like you said, the AI, we can't get rid of it, and it's everywhere. And my daughter, who's 21, will point out, "Mom, that's AI," and I'm like, "Oh, whoops!" Like sometimes it's really good; it can fool you. But I think that if we get into this, like where we allow the government, like right now, okay, Trump and ICE, it's out of control. What if they seize all of that and they say nobody else can produce AI, but we can? That is just a really slippery slope for me there. So I feel like I know the knee-jerk reaction, and that's how I used to feel about it, is that yes, we should stop this. We should agree on how we can control this bad information that's wrong. I might tell people the polls are closed or whatever, but I think we have to combat it in a different way, which is educating people how to recognize it. And somebody put in the chat, thank you, a thing about where you can go. I think it's something about recognizing deep fakes. So that's just my feeling. I think that's what we need to do. And I worry about any kind of censorship that in the wrong hands, it's not going to go the way we want it. So that's all. Thank you so much.
I have no disagreement with what you just said. If you look at what I said in the presentation, it's basically what I'm talking about is if somebody posts a fake video of Amy Klobuchar or a fake video of Chuck Schumer endorsing Spider-Man, that Chuck Schumer or Amy Klobuchar or whoever we're talking about should have the right to say, that's a fake, take it down. I am not suggesting that the government should have a right to decide what we hear and what we don't hear.
I see Brian Ramirez has his hand up. If he could unmute and ask the question or make a comment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this this meeting being set up for these kinds of discussions. The main thing that I want to say here is simply that I think the biggest solution to a lot of these issues, particularly with AI, is simply transparency. If our elections were more transparent, I think we would have more participation. I think another thing that was brought up is to empower the AI companies to help. I think that actually goes against that because there's a lot of distrust in those companies, and if people knew that they were actually getting involved like that, it might it might deter people from participating. I think again that the main thing that we really need is transparency in our elections. I think that would go a long way to solve a lot of these problems.
First, an important question, Brian. What am I looking at past your window?
It's a fake background.
Oh, okay. It's AI.
He's using AI.
Yes.
Brian, tell people.
Okay.
Brian, tell
I'm
people.
gonna say, hey, it looked real nice.
Brian,
Thank you.
please tell people who you like. Brian has a couple of IT security certifications.
Yes, I have the CompTIA Sec Plus and the CYSA Plus, and I'm a contractor for a government agency actually doing cybersecurity related work as a sysadmin.
Brian, could you tell us what you mean? Examples of more transparency?
Yes, certainly. I mean, just in the way our election systems work, I think there's not enough understanding on the public's end of how our elections are even conducted. I think that's that's something that definitely needs to change. I think the way our elections are conducted right now, it's essentially a black box, and I think that's a huge problem. I think that's an enormous problem, and I think it's a large part of the reason why we don't have 100% participation. I mean, yeah, participation's been a little better lately, but I think we still need to work on that. I mean, I don't think the general public has any concept at all of how they go to an election machine, select who they want to vote for, and how that gets tabulated and then ends up as a vote for that particular candidate.
Are there other countries that might have that information? They're doing it now?
That's a good question. My understanding is that we do have some countries. I know this is going to sound strange, but from my understanding, Nicaragua is one that actually has a fairly um, open and transparent election system, as an
So a
example.
comment that France has a fairly open and transparent system and it works pretty well. But they
Correct.
do have some advantages of central control over the country rather than by states. Along those lines, I think one of the things that protects our systems to some degree is the fact that there are 8,000 plus different systems across the board. Makes it a little bit tougher to hack, although Peter's certainly right that any serious hacking would only go after the ones that are going to matter, and that's a very small number. But increased transparency with the process in those areas is a way to hopefully combat the accusations that will come from whichever party loses an election that there was a conspiracy of some kind that caused the election to be invalid, which I view as a very serious issue for 2026.
I want to come back to the comment that was recently made about the AI companies having a bad reputation, and if people know they're involved, that would make things tougher. I am not suggesting that the AI companies monitor the elections. What I'm suggesting is that the AI companies help to train election officials so they can do a better job of monitoring the elections.
I think I see Alice has got a question as well. If you can unmute.
If my hand got raised, I have no idea how it got raised.
Okay, well, never mind. Richard Adams, I think you had a question.
Yeah, Mike, following up on what you were just saying, uh, wouldn't those technology companies already have in mind how they would go about taking this information you say they've developed and are developing to get it out to useful places and where they would interact with government or with election officials to make that happen? Don't they have some plans already?
Well, the question, yes, but the question is, you are a board of elections in a small town, or even you're a board of elections in a county or even a large city. These companies are in the business of making money. So, they have contracts. So they don't want to not keep knocking on doors saying, hey, we will train you. I mean, this is not, their business is not to seek business. Their business is to to satisfy issues. So, for example, if a state decided that it wanted to train its election officials in AI, these companies, one or several of these companies could create training programs like Microsoft has done.
Yeah.
Where you have an office with one person or two people, you're not going to keep knocking on the doors.
Right. But why shouldn't they be encouraged to do that? I know that people may be skeptical and some may be turned off by it, but sounds like they are on the road to having the information and a strategy for doing something about it. Sounds like, you kind of persuaded me that's the direction to go, especially in the short run over the next few years.
Well, because government isn't doing anything.
Right.
They are reaching out. If you look, for example, the Microsoft program, they're offering seminars. And when I say they're offering seminars, they'll go into a state and they'll say, we are going to have a program on, and interestingly with Microsoft, it's at their cost. They're not They don't charge. You come we're going to throw a seminar for you. We'll pay for the cost of the seminar.
Yeah,
We'll pay for
that's
the rental
consistent.
of the hall, and you come in. So what's intriguing to me is these companies are actually taking action that doesn't help their bottom line or even their top line, but because they see a problem.
Yeah, that's good. Take advantage of
Yeah,
that.
don't know.
And this is part of the transparency position, I think, which is an important one, and it's consistent with the points that you want to not censor but educate.
Yeah.
I want to make one other comment relative to the old machines versus new machines. Actually, old machines have usually an advantage to the extent that they produce paper output that's more easily audited. Some of the touchscreen technologies that are being put into new machines today, unfortunately, they're very high profit margin machines. They're expensive machines, but they're also very vulnerable because they're tougher to audit when there's a lack of a good paper trail in some cases. So there's again the need to be very careful where the motivation is not always pure by the voting machine manufacturers. Kelly, did you have another point you wanted to
I
make?
just want to make a point on that, which is our view has been that there needs to be a paper trail for every vote. Okay. Using, it's like when I go to get on this call, I'm not using my Radio Shack Model 2 computer or my BlackBerry. Okay. And I know you still use your BlackBerry, Mike. But the point I'm making is this. You need a backup. You need a paper backup for every vote. That's critical. However, modern equipment is harder to hack into than 10-year-old equipment. And here's a question that has nothing to do with AI, but just a point, which is a voting machine is used once every 2 years. Why couldn't Apple or the computer manufacturers create something that would be much harder to hack into? You still want a paper trail, but
I haven't.
First, we'd ask them. Yeah.
Yes, Kelly.
I actually have something about that. An IT security person I know that worked for Oracle for over 20 years. He's created a methodology and is working on trying to get vendors to build to those specs. But anyway, that's not what I was going to say. I was going to say about the AI and like helping train people at elections, boards of elections, polling stations, whatever. Maybe even better, as you said, it's great if some of these companies want to do this, and why would they be doing it if it's hurting their bottom line? But it might be better even to have other tools and outside groups that can teach, like I haven't checked out the link yet that the person put in the chat, but because again, I think back to that distrust, that Brian mentioned with some of the AI companies, and what you had, during with the Twitter files was what the government was telling Twitter to censor conservatives, and that is true. But they were also censoring people on the left that they didn't like that they were saying. So, and that was kind of what I mentioned before. So I just think maybe the training is definitely good, but the trust in the companies might be an issue. So I just think we should look for other tools or maybe other organizations that are doing that kind of work to help people recognize the AI. Like I can, like I said, I asked my daughter, she'll say, you can see the little squiggly lines on something. That's how you tell. I mean, it is very good. It really tricks you. So, but yeah, that's all. Thank you. And I'll put this link in the chat for the methodology if anybody's interested.
Mike, shouldn't an organization like this, and I don't know if there are any others, I would think there would be, but I don't know of them, could be involved in finding out which technologies you think are dependable and communicate with those organizations and publicize that this is this bipartisan group that has quite a track record of accomplishment, thinks that this is the way to go, or these are the elements to look for.
There are indeed organizations that are doing that. In some cases, they're bringing lawsuits. Other cases, they are trying to influence legislation or boards of elections. On the other side of the coin, though, there are lobbyists who are pushing more expensive machines that are not necessarily less hackable.
Let that be pointed out.
You know,
Get an argument over it. Yeah.
I just want to come back to when you look at the people who make voting machines like Dominion, Smartmatic, I mean, if you Googled the list of the 10 top voting machine manufacturers, you would find no names that you would even recognize. And the question we've asked on another subject, on another presentation, but is relevant here, is why shouldn't the president and get together with some of these with the leadership and invite Microsoft, Apple, Google, Oracle, the 10 major companies that are most involved in cybersecurity, to form a panel to make recommendations on how to strengthen our election system. I mean, the reality is it's not going to be Smartmatic or Dominion voting machines.
I think that's a good recommendation. Maybe there's a need for a commission, whether it's the presidential level or some other level, is certainly open to possibilities. Could be convened by the industry. Brian, you have another question or comment?
Yes, actually. Kelly had shown this to me. I think it was just a few days ago. It was a discussion between some tech leaders, and they were talking about what they could do to implement AI in our elections. And I'll be honest with you, it was frightening.
Mm-hmm.
The word that they kept using repeatedly was the word trust. And from a network and from a cybersecurity perspective, that is the last word you want anybody to be using in regards to anything that the public touches. That's absurd. That's what worries me, is that if you get these companies involved, all of them have some form of AI that they're already deeply invested in and need to make money on, because right now the big problem with AI is it's not making money. So they would love to be able to find some way to pawn this off to the government in order to recoup their losses. And I think they might see implementing in our election systems as a means to do that, and it terrifies me.
Yeah, here's the problem. I agree with everything you just said. The problem is 1 day every 2 years is not a business. Okay? I mean, if I'm buying a machine for 1 day every 2 years, if I'm hiring a consultant for 1 day every 2 years, I'm not making money in that business. I would love to see the government doing stuff. And the question, I'm less worried about people ripping off a system, because nobody has any money to spend. States and municipalities don't have any money to spend. The federal government is cutting everything out. And the question is not, do you trust Microsoft, Google, Apple, et cetera, but Are we better with the system with no protections and no money looking at how to counter this? Or is there some alternative?
I would start trying to work through the state governments. I wish I knew more about this. I'd go to state of Connecticut officials right now and say, I'd like to have a meeting with you. Get some conversation going among the states. They all have organizations. Legislators meet all the time. The governors meet all the time. They could spread this among themselves. If the federal government is not interested or hostile, don't rely on them. I mean,
Right.
just do this independently.
But interesting question, which was the last state to do something about this?
I have no idea.
Neither do I.
I can tell you
But I know
that
state government officials can be reached.
No,
Unlike
no,
federal
they-
officials, they are accessible.
you're right, Richard, but they're also reached by lobbyists that are opposing some of this work. And
You're not going to
I've
do
seen
this.
this.
You're
New
not going
York
to do this without spilling some blood and breaking some eggs. I mean,
Let's talk for a second about the whole larger world of AI. AI, everybody knows, is potentially very dangerous. And a lot of the companies in the AI business are concerned about that. And they do want to have regulations and guidelines and safety checks and green teams and red teams to monitor. And they're working on that. And that's not related to elections per se, but I think maybe that's something that we could bring attention to those groups who are concerned about regulating AI and including the aspects of elections that are particularly important. Some people aren't for regulation, like the head of the U.S. government, but nevertheless, it's going to be a need to have regulations about safe AI systems, and elections should be a part of that.
I would argue that the government has the ultimate hammer over all these companies. They could do lots of things. Government could do anything it wants within, reason to destroy or limit some of these companies. And by government, I mean President and Congress. What I'm
the
suggesting,
danger of regulation because governments, as we know, both parties have been useful or have used their power sometimes to somewhat unethical ends.
yeah, but let me just finish. What I am suggesting is, given the small money involved in this, and given the significance of elections, it is greatly in the interest of the AI companies to help and behave. Because as look, I mean, this isn't about AI, but when you look at how much money people from tech companies have put up for the new ballroom in the White House, you understand that the government has leverage. And incidentally, I would just people have asked me about my new condo in Gaza, and I will be staying there in the winter. But now in the summer, I'm buying a new condo in Greenland. So if you want to come visit me, that's where I'm going to be hanging out.
That is in mind as an influencer on government action, Peter. Are there any other comments or questions? We've gone over our usual 1 hour. And we do appreciate your coming off out of the hospital with all the speed and energy that you often have to bring these issues to us.
I want to come back and say one last thing, that dealing with some of the questions that were asked, because it's just 1 or 2 slides that I jumped over quickly. Of all the things that I suggested, perhaps the most important is increased and stronger audits of elections.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, you can catch it. I mean, none of this is deep secret. You can catch this stuff, but you can't catch it if you don't audit it.
It's consistent with the transparency argument as well. I think John German also has his hand up if he has something he'd like to add. John, can you unmute?
Yes, thank you. Peter's comments. First about the audits. The statistical analysis that has been done of the 2024 election, showed clearly that something that really needs to have the microscope lowered on it is the voting in key districts in the swing states, because the analysis by the best statisticians available anywhere has shown that it certainly looks like the chances of those votes having been communicated honestly when the votes were reported in from the various election districts were changed from reality, and that the chances of that having happened by chance would be something lower than all of us being struck simultaneously in all our various locations by lightning. That's the first thing. Second thing is Peter's comment about
John, can I just make a comment before you go to the second thing? I just want to say they did an audit in Detroit. I may be off one or two things, but out of like 132 election sites, the difference between the people who signed in and the voting count in 116 of the 130, there were 116 inconsistencies out of 132 voting sites.
Thank you. And so one of the conclusions after that statistical analysis was done, was the question was asked, well, what have the audits after the election shown? And the answer was, we can't get access to the data that would permit us to do a realistic audit. And in fact, they were saying that they even found there were laws against allowing anybody to have access to all that data, and that data was being purged so that nobody would ever have access to it, or it would be frozen for the next 50 years or something like that. So Peter's comment about audit couldn't be more on point. And of course, those audits have to be done after the election. So the other thing is that the recent efforts by the administration to get the voter records, the detailed voter records from all the blue states, where they've been largely unsuccessful so far, but they have gotten them from the red states, most of them, where they've asked for them, is to put together the world's best information database of detailed voter records. And one of the analyses of the ballroom, from noting the equipment that's on site and the work that's being done by that equipment, is it ain't about building the ballroom, because what it's doing is going much deeper to produce a bomb-proof data center that would be the repository of all the databases that have been stolen from all of the federal government agencies by DOJ, and all of these detailed voter records, and putting them all under that ballroom in a secure site, so that they can control everything that they need to control. And the last comment is that one thing that was key in the results of the 2024 election was voter suppression before the election, which was done very neatly, fiendishly really, by enabling individual people with no government status whatsoever to challenge voters by the tens of thousands. And then those challenges, if they were responded to correctly by election officials, typically what would happen is the challenged voter would get a postcard that looked like spam and had a 5-day return date to return it if they wanted to unchallenge themselves. Result, something like 1 or 2% of those postcards were ever returned. So voila, all those other voters were successfully challenged. And when you add them all up, there's several million voters. And when you see where they are, like Peter said, you don't have to influence many elections in many districts to win the election because they hit all the swing states. Thank you.
There were actually significantly more than several million voters who were deregistered. But one of our recommendations is what's called same-day voter registration, which is if you show up to vote and they tell you you've been deregistered, you have a chance to correct that on the day that you go to vote or the election day, whichever it is. A lot of states have adopted that, and that has made the problem in those states less significant. The problem is that a lot of the states, as we said in the presentation, like Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, swing states, haven't adopted that. So when somebody gets that notice, they're done.
You had another question? Kelly?
Oh, actually, I just wanted to mention before we sign off that the election methodology, I put the link in the chat, and it is a very serious, well thought out. Like I said, this is someone who knows technology, and I would love it, Peter, if you or anybody else would like to look at it. John is always looking to have people, he invites people to pick it apart, critique it, or whatever. So I don't know if that might interest you, but for another meeting sometime, maybe.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think this has been a very interesting discussion. I hope it's alerted us to some of the things we can do to mitigate the risks, not to eliminate them, and to recognize that it could be a very delicate time when election day finally rolls around and challenges start coming in from left field, right field, and center field.
And before we close, I want to take the opportunity to say hello to my wife, who I haven't seen for weeks and weeks and weeks, because they sent her to a different hospital and they sent me.
She's on the call.
I just noticed her. I just noticed her pop up on the call from from where.
Well, soon we would like to be able to announce the reunion of Barbara and Peter.
Well, thank you